The air was thick with tension, the sound of rushing feet, the only indication that time still moved. In the darkened alley, shadowed figures moved like ghosts, their faces twisted in anger and fear. Elena crouched against the brick wall, her breath coming in shallow gasps, her mind racing. It wasn't supposed to be this way, she thought, fingers trembling as they clutched the edge of the cold stone. She could hear their voices getting closer, each word a threat. The faint glow of a distant streetlight flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward her. A footstep, then another, breaking the silence, too close. She fought to steady herself, praying for just a few more seconds. But her heart told her otherwise, the beat growing louder in her ears, matching the rhythm of the footsteps. They were almost upon her. There was no more room to run. I should have never gotten involved, she whispered to herself, but it was too late now. The footsteps grew louder, the distance between Elena and the figures shrinking with every passing second. Panic set in, her heart hammering against her chest, each beat like a countdown to an inevitable end. She could feel the cold sweat on her brow, the air around her thick with dread. The figures stopped just a few feet away, and for a brief moment, the world fell silent. Elena's breath hitched in her throat. It's not too late, she thought. I can still get away. But the nagging doubt crept in, telling her that escape was a lie. She told herself to hold on to hope. One of the figures, tall and imposing, stepped forward, his shadow casting a long dark stretch toward her. Elena held her breath, her mind racing for a plan. There was no way out, but her instinct screamed at her to move. The quiet lasted only a moment before the first figure spoke, his voice rough like gravel. We know you're here, Elena. There's no escape. Elena's mind raced as the voice echoed in her head, each word reverberating like a drum beat. They know I'm here. A part of her wanted to scream, to fight back, but she was paralyzed with fear. Every part of her body screamed to run, but her legs felt like lead. Her breath came in shallow bursts as she glanced around the alley, searching for a way out. Nothing. Figures hadn't moved, their presence oppressive, as if the very air in the alley had thickened with their malice. You've been running too long, Elena, the man said again, his voice dripping with cruel amusement. Elena's body tensed. She knew she couldn't outrun them, but could she outsmart them? A glimmer of defiance sparked in her chest. No more running. But what could she do now? They were too close. She had one choice left. The figure in the front took another step forward, his boots scraping against the gravel. Elena's heartbeat quickened. Every muscle in her body screamed at her to move, to fight, but all she could do was stand there, frozen. He was so close now, she could smell the musk of his leather jacket and the stale air of his breath. You think you can hide from us forever, he sneered. Elena didn't answer. She couldn't. The words lodged in her throat like a jagged rock. There was a long pause. And then the figure spoke again, softer this time. You think you're the first one to run? Her mind raced. She wasn't the first to escape. There were others, she knew that much. But who? She couldn't remember. It was all too much. Her thoughts collided into a single realization. She had no time left. It was now or never. Without thinking, Elena lunged. The adrenaline surged through her, propelling her forward with unexpected speed. The world blurred around her as she pushed against the figure, her body screaming with the effort. The alley stretched before her like an endless tunnel. She could hear them chasing her, their footsteps pounding behind her faster now. She had no plan, no escape route, only the instinct to keep running. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she sprinted, her legs burning, the sound of her heart pulsing in her ears. She had to make it out. She had to. Don't look back, she told herself. But the figures were closing in fast, and the alley seemed to stretch on forever. She risked a glance over her shoulder, just for a moment, and saw the dark figures gaining on her. Her heart stopped. She was too slow. The echo of Elena's footsteps filled the empty street, each stride heavier than the last. Her mind raced, still haunted by the memory of the alley, the dark figures, the the cold breath of fear she couldn't shake. She hadn't stopped running, not for a second, not even when her legs burned with exhaustion. She couldn't afford to stop. Not yet. Every corner she turned seemed like a new dead end, but she pushed forward. The cold night air burned her lungs as she gasped for breath, but she kept moving, driven by an urge she didn't fully understand. Somewhere along the way, she had lost herself, become a version of herself she didn't recognize. She wasn't just running from the figures now, she was running from the past, from everything that had led her here. From the choices she'd made, the lies she'd told. How did I get here? Elena whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart. But no answer came. Elena stumbled into a small park, the moonlight casting soft pools of light onto the ground. The park was empty, save for a few scattered benches and trees that swayed in the wind. She collapsed onto one of the benches, her chest heaving as she tried to catch her breath. The silence was deafening, yet her mind was anything but quiet. Memories flashed before her eyes, fragments of a life she could barely recognize. She remembered the first time she saw them, the figures. They were strangers back then, faces she didn't know. But now, they were all too familiar. She thought of the choices that led her here, the secrets she had kept, the lies that had built walls around her heart. There was no escaping it now. The past had caught up with her. Elena buried her face in her hands, feeling the weight of it all. There was no way out. No way to undo what had been done. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling Elena from her spiraling thoughts. She hesitated before pulling it out, knowing who it was before she even looked. She didn't need to see the name. The message was clear. "We're coming for you." The text chilled her to the bone. She had hoped foolishly that maybe they would leave her alone. That maybe this would all end. But there was no escaping it now. She could feel the weight of the words sinking in, a crushing reminder that she was never truly free. She had tried to outrun her past, tried to bury it under layers of distance and time, but it was still there, waiting. Elena's fingers hovered over the phone, debating whether to reply, but what was the point? What could she say? There was no bargaining with them. She wasn't in control anymore. The game was over. Elena's hands shook as she tucked the phone away and leaned back against the bench, staring up at the sky. She had nowhere left to run. The city stretched out before her, silent and indifferent, a cold backdrop to her shattered world. What had she expected? That she could outrun her past? That by running away, she could erase the mistakes she had made? It was all so clear now. She had been living a lie, fooling herself into thinking she could escape. But the truth was inescapable, and no amount of running would change that. She closed her eyes, trying to calm her racing heart. She needed a plan. She needed something to hold on to. But all she had were memories. Memories of a time when life hadn't felt so heavy, so tangled in lies and deceit. Those memories seemed so distant now, like something she dreamed once. "Is it too late?" she whispered aloud, the words lingering in the air. "Is it too late to fix this?" The sound of footsteps disrupted the silence. Elena's head snapped up, her heart racing once more. She froze, instinctively pulling her knees up to her chest. A figure was approaching, their form dark against the dim streetlight. The fear surged through her once again, but this time it was different. It wasn't the same fear she had felt in the alley or during the chase. This time, it was a different kind of fear, one that came from knowing the truth. The figure stopped in front of her, silhouetted by the streetlight. "You can't hide forever," the voice said, calm and certain. Elena's breath caught in her throat. It was them, the figures from the alley. She had known this moment was coming, but she hadn't been prepared. She had no plan, no defense. She was at their mercy. "I'm not hiding," Elena replied, her voice shaking. "I'm done running." Elena's pulse hammered in her ears as the figure in front of her stepped forward, his shadow towering over her. She didn't flinch. Not this time. The silence was suffocating, thick with the weight of unspoken threats and the promise of things long overdue. "You think you can just walk away from this?" the man asked, his voice low, cold and heavy with disdain. Elena swallowed hard, her throat dry, and her heart still racing. She had been running for so long, but now, facing him, it was clear. There was no escape. "I'm not running anymore," she replied, her voice shaking but resolute. His lips curled into a thin smile, but there was no warmth in it. "That's what they all say." He reached into his coat, and Elena's breath caught. "And they all fail." Her eyes flickered to the shadows behind him, sensing movement. More of them were coming. She had no more time for games. "I'll face whatever comes," she said, her voice steady, but inside every nerve screamed. The sound of footsteps grew louder as more figures emerged from the darkness, surrounding her on all sides. Elena's heart skipped a beat. They weren't just going to talk anymore. She could see it in their eyes. The determination, the malice, the certainty that this was the end. She had been foolish to think she could outsmart them, to think she could outrun the consequences of her choices. They had found her, and now there was nowhere left to hide. She stood, her legs unsteady but resolute, and squared her shoulders. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, though the words felt hollow, even to her. One of the figures in the back laughed. A cruel sound that sent a shiver down her spine. "You should be." The leader stepped closer, his dark eyes narrowing. "You've made a lot of enemies, Elena, and now you're going to pay the price." Elena's mind raced as she calculated her options, though every thought seemed to slip through her fingers like sand. She couldn't outrun them, and there was no escape. The air felt thick with impending danger, each moment stretching out in a way that made her feel like she was suffocating. But then, just as the leader raised his hand, something shifted inside her. She wasn't the same person who had fled in fear anymore. The fear was still there, deep down, but it was buried under layers of something else. Something stronger. Something like defiance. She took a deep breath, her voice steady as she spoke. "You won't get what you want from me. You won't break me." The leader's eyes flickered with something like amusement. "You think you're strong, but you're not. You're just a scared little girl playing pretend." But Elena saw through him, through his facade of control. She wasn't playing anymore. Not this time. The tension in the air was almost tangible. Elena could feel her heartbeat echoing in her chest, but she refused to let them see her fear. They were expecting her to break, to beg, to cower before them, but she would not give them that satisfaction. The leader took another step forward, his voice cold and mocking. "You've always been a fighter, Elena, but you're running out of places to hide. You've made this personal." He paused, letting his words hang in the air like poison. "You'll regret this." Elena met his gaze with unwavering defiance. "I regret nothing. You don't get to control me anymore." For a moment, there was silence. The figures behind the leader shifted, unsure of how to react. The leader himself seemed to falter, the flicker of uncertainty passing across his face. But only for a second. "Fine," he said, his voice hardening once more. "We'll see how long you can keep up this charade." With the leader's words hanging in the air, Elena knew the stakes had just been raised. She wasn't just fighting for her life now, she was fighting for her very identity, for her ability to choose her own path. She could see it in the leader's eyes, the calculation, the cruelty, the way he knew exactly how to twist the knife. But Elena wasn't going to let him. She wasn't going to let any of them control her ever again. Her breath steadied, and her mind cleared, sharper than it had been in days. She turned on her heel, making her move before they could react. The leader's shout rang out, but Elena was already gone, running through the park, her legs carrying her faster than they ever had before. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was done running from them, but she couldn't stand still either. The chase had only just begun. Elena's legs burned as she ran through the alleyways, the figures closing in behind her, their footfalls growing louder with each passing second. She had taken so many turns, darted through so many streets, but there was nowhere left to hide. Her mind raced, searching for a way out, but the fear and exhaustion clouded her thoughts. Then, out of nowhere, a sharp voice sliced through the air. "You can't outrun your past forever, Elena." She froze, the words echoing in her mind. She turned, heart pounding, and came face to face with a figure she hadn't expected. A man she thought she'd never see again, Marcus, a former ally, now standing in the shadows, his face a mask of cold indifference. Elena's breath caught in her throat. "Marcus, you? Why are you here?" His lips curled into a thin smile. "Funny how the past always catches up, isn't it?" Elena's heart raced. The last person she wanted to see was Marcus, especially not now, when everything was falling apart. "I thought you were gone," Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus stepped forward, the cold glint of his eyes never leaving hers. "I never left, Elena. I've been watching." His words hit her like a blow, the betrayal from a man she once trusted now slicing through her with chilling clarity. She had always wondered why she had felt so exposed, so hunted, and now the reason was clear. "You were the one who led them to me," she asked, barely able to contain the anger building inside her. Marcus didn't flinch. "I had no choice," he said, his voice cool and detached. "You made your bed. Now you lie in it." Elena's eyes narrowed. "I'm not going to let you control me anymore," she spat, her hands clenched at her sides. Marcus laughed darkly, a sound that made Elena's skin crawl. "You're still so naive," he said, his tone mocking. "You really think you can change things now? The moment you walked away from the life I gave you, you sealed your fate. You've always been part of this." Elena shook her head, disbelief flooding through her. "No, I was trying to get out. I didn't want any of this." Marcus took a step closer, his voice lowering to a near whisper. "That's the lie you tell yourself. You're never really out, Elena. You were born into this world. You'll always be a part of it." Elena's chest tightened as the weight of his words hit her. She had thought she could escape her past, but now it seemed that no matter what she did, it was inescapable. "You've been playing a game that was rigged from the start," Marcus continued. "And now you're going to lose." Elena felt her world shift, her thoughts spiraling. She had been so sure she could escape, but the truth was crushing. Everything she had fought for, everything she had believed in, was nothing more than a facade. "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I thought I could leave it all behind. I thought I could be free." Marcus' expression softened, just for a moment, but his words were unforgiving. "Freedom is an illusion. You'll always be tethered to the past." Elena's body tensed with rage. "You're wrong," she said, her voice steadier now. "I will not let you control me anymore." The realization hit her like a slap to the face. She had always been more than a pawn in someone's game. No longer would she let the past dictate her choices. She took a step forward, locking eyes with Marcus. "I'll make my own fate," she declared. Marcus's smile faltered for just a moment, a hint of doubt crossing his features. Without warning, Elena turned and sprinted down the alley, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no plan, no idea where she was going, but she couldn't stand still. She was done playing by their rules. Done being their pawn. The sound of Marcus' voice echoed in the distance, but she didn't look back. "You can run, but you can't hide," he shouted, but his words only fueled her determination. Elena kept running, every step propelling her further away from the life she had been trapped in for so long. She wouldn't stop. She couldn't stop. But even as she raced through the alley, her mind raced too, questions swirling. Was it really possible to outrun the past? Could she truly escape the life that had been forced upon her? No. The past would always follow her. But she could take control. She would choose her own fate from this point forward. Elena's chest heaved as she stumbled into the abandoned warehouse, her legs burning with exhaustion, her heart pounding relentlessly in her chest. The walls around her were lined with dust and decay, the silence thick, suffocating. She could hear the distant echo of footsteps behind her, but there was no way out. No doors. No windows. She was trapped. She pressed her back against the cold metal door, her breath ragged and shallow. For a brief moment, she closed her eyes, remembering everything that had brought her here, the lies, the betrayals, the broken promises. She had never chosen this life. But now, it felt like the only one she could live. "There's no way out," she whispered to herself, feeling the weight of her words in the stillness of the room. But something shifted in her, deep inside. "No," she thought. "There has to be a way." She had come too far to turn back. This was her fight now, and she would finish it. The door behind her creaked as it opened, and Elena turned, eyes wide in fear. Figures entered, their silhouettes dark against the faint light. The leader, Marcus, was at the forefront, his cold gaze locking onto hers. "You can't hide forever, Elena," he said, his voice steady and unwavering. She braced herself, taking a step forward, though her body trembled. "I'm not hiding," she said, her voice shaking but strong. "I'm facing this." Marcus chuckled, the sound cold and cruel. "Brave words," he mocked. "But words won't save you." He stepped closer, his eyes scanning her, sizing her up. Elena's fists clenched, the adrenaline coursing through her. She wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not ever. "You've already lost," Marcus continued, his voice dripping with disdain. But Elena's eyes burned with fire. "No," she retorted. "I'm just getting started." "Then maybe." Marcus took another step toward her, his eyes narrowing with malice. "You're foolish if you think you can stand up to me," he sneered. Elena's heart raced, but she stood her ground, refusing to let fear dictate her next move. She had been running for far too long. She wasn't going to let him win. Her gaze hardened as she squared off with him. "I've learned a lot from you," she said, her voice steady. "I learned that running, hiding, and lying only gets you so far. But facing the truth, that's where real power lies." Marcus scoffed, clearly unimpressed. "You think you're stronger than me?" he challenged. Elena nodded. "I know I am." The silence between them was deafening, but Elena could feel it, the shift. She had power now, the kind that came from owning her choices, from refusing to be a victim any longer. She wasn't the same woman who had run from her past. No, she was something more. Something unstoppable. Without warning, Marcus lunged forward, but Elena was ready. She sidestepped, her body moving with a grace she hadn't known she possessed. Marcus crashed into a stack of crates, sending them tumbling to the ground with a deafening crash. He quickly regained his footing, his face contorted in fury. Elena, on the other hand, stood with her breath steady, her eyes sharp. She wasn't afraid. She was focused. Marcus' anger was evident as he advanced again, but this time, Elena anticipated his every move, dodging his strikes and countering with precision. It was as if the fight had unlocked something inside her. A raw, untapped power. She wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. She was fighting for everything she had lost. For every moment she had let slip away. Marcus was relentless, but Elena was no longer the woman who ran from him. She was a force, unstoppable and resolute. And for the first time in a long while, she knew she was in control. With every move, Elena grew more confident, her body and mind working in harmony. Marcus, however, was beginning to falter. His movements grew erratic, fueled by rage and frustration. The fight had shifted, and he could feel it. He swung at Elena, but she dodged again, this time using his momentum against him. With a swift move, she knocked him to the ground, her breath coming in short gasps as she stood over him. She wasn't going to let him get up this time. She had him. "You've lost," she said, her voice calm but filled with unshakable certainty. Marcus looked up at her, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You think this is over?" he sneered, his voice shaking with anger. Elena shook her head. "It's just beginning." And with that, she turned, walking away from him, leaving him sprawled on the ground, defeated. She had won. But more than that, she had taken back control of her life. Elena stood in the quiet aftermath, the air around her heavy with the stillness of what had just transpired. She could hear the distant hum of the city, the faint sound of cars passing by, but it felt as if time itself had slowed down. Her breathing was steady now, the adrenaline from the fight finally subsiding, leaving her with nothing but an aching sense of relief. She had done it. She had faced her demons and survived. But as the adrenaline faded, a new wave of emotions began to settle in: emptiness, loss, uncertainty. She had won, but at what cost? Elena glanced around the warehouse, the place that had been both her prison and her battleground. The walls were still, covered in the aftermath of the fight, but to her, they seemed to reflect the turmoil inside her. She wasn't sure where she would go next or what her future held. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could breathe. She wasn't running anymore. Elena stepped out of the warehouse, the night air cool against her skin. The world seemed different now. It wasn't that anything had changed. Nothing on the outside had, at least. But everything within her had. She had shed the weight of fear and doubt, and for the first time, she felt the spark of something new: hope. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. She knew that. There were scars to heal, wounds to tend to. But Elena felt like she had reclaimed a piece of herself, something that had been lost in the chaos of the past. "I don't have to be afraid anymore," she whispered, almost to herself. The words felt strange, foreign, but empowering. She had walked through the storm and emerged stronger for it. Now, there was nothing stopping her. She didn't know what came next, but she was ready to find out. The past had no hold on her anymore. She was free. Elena took a deep breath and began to walk down the empty street, the rhythmic sound of her footsteps the only noise breaking the silence. The weight of the past few days had left her exhausted, but it wasn't the exhaustion of defeat. It was the tiredness that comes with victory, with the quiet satisfaction of knowing that she had done what she set out to do. She wasn't entirely sure where she was going, but that no longer seemed important. She had always thought she needed a plan, a direction, but now, the journey itself felt more important than the destination. She had made it this far by trusting herself, by listening to her gut. And she would continue to do so. Elena knew there would be challenges ahead. Life wasn't about to hand her any easy answers. But for the first time, she felt like she could face whatever came next. She had taken control of her life. And that was enough. The night seemed endless, but Elena didn't mind. She was finally walking on her own, free from the burdens that had once controlled her. The city seemed to welcome her, its familiar streets no longer intimidating, but open with potential. She was a stranger in her own life for so long, but now she was starting to feel like she belonged here again. She had lived in the shadows for so long, never quite stepping into the light. But now, that light was hers. Elena felt a smile tug at the corners of her lips. It wasn't a smile of triumph. It was a smile of acceptance, of peace. "This is it," she thought. "This is where I'm meant to be." The path ahead was unclear, and maybe it always would be. But she had learned to trust herself, to trust the choices she made, and that was enough. The past no longer had a hold on her. She was moving forward, one step at a time. Elena reached a quiet park, the one place she had come to in the past for moments of reflection. The swings still creaked gently in the breeze, and the bench where she had once sat, filled with fear and uncertainty, was now a symbol of how far she had come. She sat on the bench, allowing herself a moment of quiet reflection. She could still feel the weight of her past, the choices that had led her to this point, but now they no longer defined her. The storm had passed. She had weathered it. And now, she could look forward with hope, knowing that whatever came next, she was ready for it. Elena closed her eyes for a brief moment, feeling the peace of the moment wash over her. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to just be. She was free. And for the first time, she could see the future unfolding before her, not as a victim, but as the architect of her own destiny. The first light of dawn broke over the city, casting a soft glow across the empty streets. Elena stood by the edge of a rooftop, watching the sun rise in the distance. The air was cool, the quiet of the early morning providing a sense of calm that she had longed for. It felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something, or maybe just waiting for her. She had come so far. She had faced the darkness, fought through the chaos, and now, as the city slowly came to life below her, Elena felt an overwhelming sense of peace. She had chosen her own path, and for the first time she was truly free. The past was behind her, no longer a shadow that loomed over her every step. It was just a memory now. She didn't know what the future held, but in this moment, that uncertainty didn't feel scary. It felt promising. With a deep breath, Elena smiled, her heart light, ready for whatever was next. Elena turned and walked away from the edge of the rooftop, her footsteps echoing softly as she made her way toward the door. The world had changed in so many ways, and so had she. She had left behind the fear, the anger, the need for vengeance. Those things no longer defined her. She had learned that strength wasn't about never falling, but about always getting back up. She had rebuilt herself from the ground up, piece by piece. There was no going back to who she had been before. That person was lost in the shadows of her past. Instead, she had emerged stronger, braver, more whole. The journey had been long and hard, but it had brought her here, to this moment, this place of quiet understanding. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. The road ahead was still uncertain, but Elena no longer felt afraid of it. Whatever came next, she would face it head-on, just as she had done everything else. As she stepped into the elevator, Elena's thoughts drifted to the people she had lost along the way. Her heart ached for them, for the ones who had walked beside her, but she knew they had been part of her journey for a reason. There were some people who were meant to be in your life for a season, and she had to accept that. The people who mattered now were the ones who had remained, who had supported her, even when she didn't deserve it. She would carry them with her, even if they weren't physically beside her anymore. The doors of the elevator closed with a soft chime, and Elena exhaled slowly, letting the quiet settle around her. For the first time, she felt complete. There were no more ghosts chasing her, no more shadows that needed to be confronted. She had peace, and she knew it was a gift that she would carry with her from here on out. Elena walked out of the building, the warmth of the sun now fully embracing her. It felt good. It felt like a new chapter, one where she could truly breathe and step into her own power. The streets were bustling with life as people went about their daily routines. She was just another person among them now, no longer an outsider. The life she had fought for, the peace she had earned, was hers to keep. She was no longer defined by the fear, the trauma, or the battles she had fought. Elena was finally free. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and for a moment she hesitated. She didn't need to check it. She wasn't running from anything anymore. She wasn't hiding. The future was wide open, and she had everything she needed to face it. With one last look at the city around her, Elena smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here, and the woman she had become. Elena stood at the intersection, waiting for the light to change. A car honked in the distance, the noise of the city swirling around her, but in that moment, everything was still. She had made it. She had taken back control of her life. She was no longer running from her past or from her own fears. Elena knew that life would never be without challenges. There would always be moments of doubt, times when the past would try to creep back into her thoughts. But she was ready. Ready to face whatever came next, ready to step into the world without hesitation. The light changed, and Elena took her first step into the crosswalk, a small but significant action. Her journey wasn't over, but she knew that with each step, she was moving forward, toward the future she had fought so hard to claim. This was her moment. This was her life. She smiled, knowing that she was ready for anything.